The harsh light of distant stars flickered through the small, battered viewport of the spaceship. For years, the ship had traveled the unknown depths of space, carrying with it a cargo that had long since grown too familiar to its solitary passenger. The vast emptiness of space had a way of making everything feel small, insignificant, and endlessly lonely. And yet, there she was, an alien woman, stranded on this desolate vessel, begging for something she had never expected to need, a human to help her. Her name, if she had ever truly had one, was unspoken, a forgotten relic of a civilization that had long since fallen into decay. She was unlike anything the human man had ever encountered before, yet her eyes so full of desperation, so human in their vulnerability, were the only thing that kept him tethered to reality. He had never seen a creature so full of sorrow, so desperate for kindness. Her race, her people, most of them were gone, wiped out by forces beyond anyone's control. She was the last of her kind, and as she sat before him, her voice trembling, her eyes wide with the weight of what she was about to ask, he knew that nothing would ever be the same again. "I need you," she said softly, her voice almost a whisper. "Please, I know it's impossible, but I need you to marry me. My people, they cannot survive without it. My species will perish if I don't find a partner. You are the only one left." The man looked at her, struggling to comprehend the gravity of her words. His mind raced, trying to make sense of what she was saying. Marry her? How could he? They were worlds apart, literally. She was an alien, an entirely different species from a distant star system. They had no shared history, no connection, nothing in common except their mutual struggle for survival in this vast, uncharted universe. But as the silence stretched on, something within him stirred. Her plea was so raw, so honest, that it pierced through the cold armor of logic and reason that had always shielded him. He could see the vulnerability in her eyes, the fear of extinction, the fear of being completely alone in a universe that had already claimed so much of her existence. "Why me?" he asked, his voice uncertain. "Why would you want me? I'm just a human. I don't understand what this means for you or your people." Her gaze softened, her delicate hands trembling as she reached out to him, as if desperate to make him understand. "I don't want to, but I have no choice. My people, we were once powerful, rulers of a vast empire that spanned many worlds. But now we are nothing. The last of us, scattered across the stars. Our species cannot continue unless we find a mate from another race. Our survival depends on it. And you are the closest we can find. You, a human, can give me what I need to save us all." The weight of her words hung in the air like a thick fog. The man found himself at a crossroads. He had no idea what this would mean for him. Would he be able to give her what she needed? Was it even possible? And if it was, what would it cost him? A lifetime of uncertainty, the harsh judgment of a universe that could never understand their bond. He turned away from her, his mind whirling. The decision seemed impossible, but he couldn't ignore the pull of her desperation. The thought of leaving her to face her fate alone was unbearable. And yet, how could he make such a life-altering choice based on something as fragile as a plea from a stranger? The silence between them deepened. She had told him everything, every painful truth of her people's downfall, every desperate plea for survival. But she had left out one key piece of information What would he be risking by accepting her proposal? Could a human even survive the bond of marriage with an alien species? Could they, against all odds, build a future together? As he sat there, torn between duty and the overwhelming urge to help, his mind wandered to his past, his lonely existence, the absence of true connection in a world where every person seemed to fade into the background. He had never truly belonged anywhere, and yet, here was this alien woman offering him a chance to truly matter, to be part of something much larger than himself. But the weight of her request was staggering. How could he possibly be the answer to her prayers? Was this just a cruel twist of fate, or was it the beginning of something greater than either of them could ever comprehend? With a deep breath, he turned back toward her, ready to make a decision that would change everything. His voice was barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of his soul. I don't know if I can do this. I don't even know if I should. But I will help you. I will do whatever it takes to keep you from being alone. The alien woman's face softened, her eyes filling with tears as she reached out to him, her hand shaking as it touched his. You don't understand. This isn't just about us anymore. It's about the survival of an entire species. If we don't succeed, everything will be lost. But with you, with your help, there's hope. There's a chance. And for the first time in my life, I can believe in something again. The man stood still, feeling the enormity of her words settle into his chest. He had never been part of something so important, so life-changing. The stakes had never been higher. But the question remained, what would they both risk to ensure a future for the alien race? And what would he lose in the process? As they stood in the quiet of the spaceship, a strange connection began to form between them, one born not from shared species or history, but from the undeniable truth that they were both fighting for survival in a world that had already taken so much. He wasn't sure where this journey would lead them, or what the future would hold, but one thing was clear: this was only the beginning. And as the stars outside the window shimmered, so too did the possibility of something unimaginable. Would love and duty truly be enough to save them both? Only time would tell. The days that followed were filled with silence, interrupted only by the hum of the ship's engines and the occasional creaking of its worn metal frame. The man spent hours in his quarters, pacing back and forth, wrestling with the decision that had been thrust upon him. What had he agreed to? A life with an alien? The thought was absurd. But then again, he had already known that life wasn't going to follow the path he expected. When he had first joined the space fleet, he had been eager to explore the stars, to fight in the name of humanity's expansion. But now, faced with a plea for help from a desperate alien woman, he'd barely spoken to her since that night. She had retreated into her corner of the ship, a place that felt distant and alien, even though he knew it was part of the same vessel they shared. The silence between them felt thick, pressing down on his chest with every passing hour. The weight of her request was heavy on his mind, and it wasn't just the survival of her species that troubled him. It was the complexity of their bond. What did marriage between their two species mean? Could they even truly understand each other? The language of love might be universal, but he knew there was more at play here than simple affection. The woman, for her part, seemed withdrawn, quieter than she had been in the moments following her desperate plea. He had expected her to be anxious, or perhaps even impatient, but instead she kept her distance. He could only guess at what she was thinking, what fears and regrets might be keeping her from reaching out again. For all he knew, she could have been struggling with the same uncertainties that plagued him. She had laid herself bare before him, admitting the devastating reality of her existence, and now it seemed like she was waiting for him to make the next move. But what move could he make? How could he possibly comprehend the magnitude of the situation, let alone navigate it with her? The ship's comm system interrupted his thoughts. The familiar voice of Lieutenant Davis crackled over the speaker, pulling him back into reality. "Sir, we've detected an anomaly on the outer perimeter. It's odd, not like anything we've encountered before." His pulse quickened. The universe was already full of strange things, but what could be waiting for them out there in the deep void of space? He glanced at the door to the room where the alien woman was likely still hiding, and a pang of unease twisted in his gut. Whatever was out there, it was just another layer of the uncertainty that surrounded everything. He didn't have time to figure out all the answers before it was too late. He responded quickly, "I'm on my way." In moments, he was at the bridge. The crew was tense, their faces lit by the cold blue glow of the consoles. Davis, his trusted communications officer, was already working to gather information on the anomaly, fingers flying over the controls. It's a signal," Davis said, furrowing his brow, "coming from the edge of a nearby star system. But there's something strange about it. It's not just a regular transmission. It's like it's being sent through a massive energy field." A deep, uneasy silence settled over the crew as the implications of that statement sank in. An energy field, one that could possibly interfere with their systems, distort their perception of reality, or even worse, hide something truly dangerous. The woman's warning about her species' plight echoed in his mind. If this was connected to her people, if there was some unknown force or threat still out there, waiting to strike, it could mean that everything they had learned about her race, her history, might only be the surface of a far darker story. A story they were only just beginning to uncover. Is there a way to track it? Can we pinpoint its origin? Turner asked, his voice sharp, more out of instinct than actual clarity. Davis nodded, but his expression was one of clear hesitation. "It's difficult, sir. Whatever is emitting this signal, it's like it's hiding itself in a frequency band we can't easily decipher. We'll need to get closer to figure it out, but the risk of coming too close. I'm not sure what we'll find." The captain turned his attention to the view screen, watching the star systems that passed by, oblivious to their journey. "Prepare a course to investigate it," he ordered. There was no turning back now. Whether this anomaly had any connection to the alien woman or not, it seemed too important to ignore. He walked back to his quarters, hoping for a moment of solitude to think. But as he approached the door, it slid open unexpectedly. She was standing there, her presence filling the small space. Her golden, iridescent eyes met his with a mixture of hope and desperation. She hadn't spoken much to him since their last conversation, but her silence now felt heavier than ever. "You heard," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. It wasn't a question, but a statement, one that carried the weight of everything she was too afraid to voice. "You know it's connected, don't you?" His heart skipped a beat. She was speaking in riddles, as if she knew more than she was telling. And somehow, he understood her words before she even said them. He had felt it in the pit of his stomach, the weight of the unknown. The anomaly, the signal. It was more than just a threat to humanity, or even to the crew. This was about her survival, her race, and the fate of everything she had once known. "Tell me what you know," he demanded, his voice low but steady. Her gaze faltered, and for the first time, she seemed vulnerable in a way that he hadn't anticipated. It's them, the ones who destroyed my people. They've come for us all. They won't stop until we're gone." She took a deep breath, her entire body trembling. "And you're the only one who can stop it." The captain felt a shiver run down his spine. Her words were filled with the kind of truth that left no room for doubt, no way to escape from what was coming. He had believed her, once believed her plea, her story, but now, faced with the magnitude of what was being asked of him, he wasn't sure he could handle the responsibility. Could he truly stop whatever was coming? Could he prevent the annihilation of her species, and perhaps his own, by making the unimaginable choice of connecting their fates? His mind was reeling. What if he had already signed their death sentence just by agreeing to her request? What if their very bond was the key to unlocking something far darker than they could even imagine? "Tell me everything," he said, his voice barely a whisper, his eyes meeting hers. Her eyes glistened, and for a moment he saw her as something more than just an alien. She wasn't the being who had begged for servitude, or the alien whose species was on the brink of extinction. She was a person, a woman with hopes, fears, and a history that had been violently torn apart. And in that brief moment, he realized the gravity of the situation. Whatever she had been through, whatever had driven her to this point, was far worse than he had ever imagined. The silence between them was suffocating, filled only by the hum of the ship's systems. He could feel the weight of her gaze on him, the unspoken plea in her eyes. But as much as he wanted to believe her, as much as he wished to save her and her people, the reality of the situation was overwhelming. Could he trust her? Could he trust himself? Every step he took now felt like it was leading him down an irreversible path, one that might cost him everything he knew, everything he had ever loved. She stepped closer, her voice trembling. "They know we're here. They're watching us. And if you don't act quickly, they will find us, find me, and they will finish what they started." Her hands reached out, clutching at his sleeves. "Please, you have to believe me." The sincerity in her voice, the desperation that seemed to seep into her very being, almost broke his resolve. He wanted to believe her, wanted to take her hand and promise that everything would be okay. But the man knew better than to be swayed by emotion alone. The stakes were too high. The unknown forces that threatened them both could not be underestimated, and even now he wasn't sure what they were truly up against. He let out a slow breath, his mind whirling. "What exactly is it that you're asking me to do? If you're right about this, if these enemies are coming for us, what role do I play in this?" Her eyes locked onto his, as though she was searching for some hidden truth, some key that would unlock his next move. "You are the only one who can stop them," she said, her voice low but insistent. "The ship, your people, your technology, all of it. It's the only chance we have. They don't know about your race, not yet, but when they do, they'll destroy you just like they did to us. They've wiped out every civilization they've encountered, every race that's dared to stand in their way. And now they're coming for you." She was right. He could feel it in his gut. The urgency in her words wasn't just fear, it was raw, terrifying knowledge. The kind of knowledge that made his blood run cold. He had always believed that humans were resilient, adaptable, capable of surviving anything. But this wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about a force so powerful, so ancient, that it could erase entire civilizations with ease. "I don't know how to stop them," he admitted, the words tasting bitter on his tongue. "I don't have the answers. All I have is this ship and my crew. We're just humans. How can we possibly stand against what you're describing?" She shook her head, her golden eyes filled with something between sadness and resolve. It's not about what you have. It's about what you are. Your people are more than just flesh and blood. You have something the others don't, something they can't understand. Your will, your ability to fight, to adapt, to refuse to bow down to anything that seeks to control you. The weight of her words hung heavy in the air, and for a moment he felt a surge of hope. Could it be true? Was humanity really capable of such defiance in the face of unimaginable odds? Before he could respond, the ship's alarms blared, the loud, jarring noise pulling them both back to the present. The lights flickered, and the ship's artificial gravity wavered as if it were struggling to keep them grounded. It was a warning and intrusion. Something was happening. Something was coming. "They're here," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rising chaos. Without thinking, he grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the bridge. The corridors were alive with frantic crew members running in all directions, each person trying to assess the situation, but there was an unmistakable panic in their eyes. They had felt it too, the disturbance, the strange energy surge that had been building in the last few hours. Whatever was happening, it wasn't just a random malfunction. It was a calculated assault, and it was happening now. As they reached the bridge, the view through the main viewport was a sickening sight. A massive shadow loomed just beyond the ship, dark and imposing, blocking out the distant stars. The ship's sensors had already detected it, but the sheer scale of the craft left the crew speechless. It was nothing like they had ever seen before, smooth, black, and seemingly alive, pulsing with an energy that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. It was as if the ship itself was part of something far older, far more sinister. "Captain," Lieutenant Davis's voice cut through the tension. "We've lost contact with the outer systems. The anomaly we detected, it's moving. Whatever it is, it's here now." The alien woman stepped forward, her face pale, her eyes wide with dread. "It's them. The ones who destroyed my people. They've come for us. For all of us." The captain's hands trembled as he gripped the edge of the command console, staring at the alien craft that loomed ominously outside. His mind raced, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. What was their next move? How could they possibly stand against an enemy like this? But even as the fear threatened to swallow him whole, something else sparked within him, a surge of determination, the same will that the woman had spoken of. They weren't just going to lie down and let this happen. They couldn't. They had to fight. "Prepare for battle," he ordered, his voice steady despite the chaos. "We may be outmatched, but we won't go down without a fight." The crew sprang into action, the tension on the bridge palpable as they scrambled to ready the ship's defenses. But in that moment, the captain knew that this fight was not just about survival. It was about something far more important, protecting everything they held dear. This wasn't just about defending Earth. It was about showing the universe that humanity would never bow to forces that sought to destroy them. But as the alien ship's engines powered up, sending out a wave of raw, pulsating energy that reverberated through their own vessel, the captain couldn't help but wonder, was it too late? Had they already been caught in a trap from which there was no escape? He didn't have the answer yet, but as the ship's weapons systems powered on, he made a vow whatever happened next, they would fight. They would fight with everything they had. And somehow, some way, they would win. The first shots rang out, and the battle for their survival began. The ship shook violently as the first salvo from the alien craft slammed into their hull. The sound of the impact reverberated through the bridge like a thunderclap, and alarms blared in every corner of the ship. The lights flickered, plunging them into temporary darkness before they flickered back on, bathing the crew in an eerie red glow. Captain Turner's knuckles whitened as he gripped the command console, his thoughts racing. "Damage report," he barked. "Minor breaches on Deck 7. "We're holding for now, Captain, but it won't last long," Lieutenant Davis responded, his voice tight with urgency. The fear in his voice was palpable, but Turner could see the determination in his eyes. They were ready to fight. "Return fire," Turner commanded. "Focus all energy weapons on their forward shields. We need to stop them before they get too close." The crew quickly responded, but as the weapons fired, a sickening realization set in. The alien ship's shields absorbed their shots effortlessly, like it was made of some kind of advanced material that their weapons couldn't penetrate. It was like firing at a wall of nothingness, an impenetrable barrier that swallowed every strike without a scratch. "Captain, they've adapted," Harris shouted from her station. "Their shields, they're reflecting our shots. This isn't just a battle, it's a trap." Turner's heart raced. He knew they were outmatched, but not like this. This was something far beyond any battle strategy they had. It was as if the alien craft anticipated their every move. They had no time to waste. He glanced at the alien woman, who was standing near the back of the bridge, her face pale but resolute. "You knew, didn't you?" Turner said through gritted teeth, his voice low but sharp. She met his gaze, her eyes filled with sorrow. "I knew they were powerful, but I didn't know they had already infiltrated your defenses." "What do you mean?" Turner demanded. He could feel the dread creeping in, his mind racing to connect the dots. How could they have infiltrated us without us noticing? Before she could respond, the ship rocked again, harder this time, sending everyone stumbling. A voice echoed from the ship's speakers, mechanical and cold, but unmistakable. "Humanity," the voice said, "you are too late." The voice sent chills down Turner's spine, and for a moment, everything froze. The alien ship's presence was no longer just a physical threat. It had become personal. The voice was not just some distant transmission, it was here. The ship, once a symbol of humanity's strength, had been compromised. Harris quickly typed commands into her console, her face hard with focus. "Captain, the alien ship has breached our systems. They have control over our weapons, our shields, everything." "How is that even possible?" Turner asked, his voice thick with disbelief. "It's like they've infiltrated our code," Harris replied. "They're manipulating our systems from the inside. The moment we made contact, they were already in." The alien woman, standing at the back of the room, seemed to shrink under the pressure of the situation. "They've been waiting for this. They've always been watching, always calculating. And now, they've taken everything from you." "Enough," Turner snapped, turning his gaze toward her. "I trusted you. I fought with you. But if this is your fault, if you've led us into this—" "No." The woman's voice cracked, but she took a step forward, desperation in her eyes. "I never wanted this. I only wanted to survive. My people only wanted to survive. The enemies I warned you about, they're the ones who've been behind everything. They're not just alien invaders. They are beings beyond time, beyond your understanding. They've manipulated every aspect of your world without you even knowing. And they've done the same to me." The room fell silent, the weight of her words hanging in the air like a heavy fog. Turner could feel the tension in the room building. the uncertainty creeping in. He had trusted her, believed her when she said they could fight this. But now it seemed like the very foundation of their mission was collapsing. The alien enemies weren't just external threats. They had already infiltrated everything, their technology, their ship, their very existence. "We can't fight back if they control everything," Harris said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We need to get to the core systems and regain control, if it's even possible at this point." Turner nodded, his mind scrambling for a plan, any way to regain the advantage. The thought of retreating never crossed his mind, but staying still was not an option. They had to act fast before their ship was torn apart from the inside out. "I'll lead the team to the core systems," Turner said, his voice cold and determined. "Harris, get the secondary systems online. We need any weapons we can get, no matter how weak they are. The rest of you, hold them off. We need time to break their hold." The crew quickly split into teams, each person focused on a single objective. Turner knew the stakes were higher than ever before. They weren't just fighting an alien race anymore. They were fighting a manipulation that had been years in the making, a force far greater than anything humanity had ever faced. As Turner and his team made their way to the core systems, the walls of the ship seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy, like the heartbeat of the enemy itself. The air felt heavy with the sense of being watched, of knowing that time was running out. Every second brought them closer to their doom, and yet they pressed on. But just as they reached the control center, another unexpected twist came. The lights flickered once more, and the walls themselves seemed to tremble. Turner's heart raced as a cold metallic voice echoed through the ship's systems once more. "You have been deceived, Captain Turner. The one you call ally, she is one of us." The words hit like a thunderclap, and for a split second, the room went completely still. Turner's mind reeled as the implications sank in. The woman they had been fighting to save, the woman he had trusted, was now the enemy. The words echoed in the command center, leaving a chill that froze the air. Turner's thoughts raced as he turned to face the alien woman, who now stood motionless in the corner, her expression unreadable. She had known. She had known all along. You're one of them." Turner's voice trembled, barely a whisper, as disbelief flooded through him. The woman didn't respond immediately. She stood there, silent, her features a mask of regret and resignation. Then, finally, her voice broke through, softer than he had ever heard it before. "I never wanted to deceive you, but the truth is far darker than you realize." Turner's fists clenched, and he took a step forward. "What truth?" "You've been feeding us lies. You've manipulated us into trusting you, into believing that we had a chance. And now we're trapped, with no way out." The woman's eyes flickered to the screens in the control center. "It wasn't always supposed to be like this. I came here to warn you, to protect you from them. I thought I could help you." She paused, her voice breaking. "But they've been controlling me, just like they've controlled everything else. You don't understand. My people were manipulated too. They are not just invaders. They are the ones who created us. They control everything, even me." The realization hit Turner like a freight train. All this time, the woman had been a pawn, just as much a victim as humanity was. She had been manipulated by the same force that was now attacking them, using her as a vessel to further their plans. The words she spoke were drenched in pain, and for the first time, Turner saw the torment in her eyes. "I couldn't fight them," she continued, her voice trembling. "Not alone. But now, with you, I thought we could resist. But they have already infiltrated your systems, and we don't have much time. They've set their sights on Earth, and you're running out of time to stop them." Turner's mind was a whirlwind. Every word, every piece of the puzzle he thought he had solved, now seemed irrelevant. They weren't facing just an alien race, but a force that had been manipulating everything, even their own lives. The feeling of betrayal stung, but there was something else, a new sense of understanding. The woman hadn't come to destroy them. She had come to warn them, even though it was far too late. "We can still stop them," Turner said, his voice steady despite the storm inside. "We can still fight." The woman shook her head, her eyes filled with grief. "You don't understand. It's not about fighting them. It's about surviving. They're not here for a war. They're here to erase you, to erase everyone who isn't like them." Turner stood frozen, the weight of her words settling over him. It wasn't just about defeating an enemy. It was about preventing complete annihilation. And time was running out. His crew, his ship, the very future of Earth hung in the balance. He turned toward Harris, his mind snapping into action. "What's our status?" "We're almost there, Captain," Harris replied, her voice grim. "The secondary systems are online, but we don't have full control yet. We're still vulnerable." "Keep working," Turner said, then turned to the alien woman. "You know how to stop them. Tell me how." For a moment, she hesitated, then nodded. "There's a way to disrupt their connection to your systems. It won't destroy them, but it will give you a fighting chance." Turner felt a surge of hope. It wasn't the perfect solution, but it was something. They weren't completely helpless. They could still fight back. But just as they began preparing the final sequence to break the alien control, a new wave of terror slammed into them. The ship's hull groaned under the strain as the alien vessel closed in, its dark, menacing shape filling every viewscreen. The ancients, the true masters of this war, were upon them. "This is it," Harris said, her voice barely audible. "They're coming for us." Turner turned to his crew. There was no time left to second guess. They had to act. He gripped the command chair tightly. "Activate the sequence now." The control room was bathed in a flash of light as the final sequence activated, a cascade of energy surging through the ship's systems. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, as if the universe held its breath, the ship shook again. But this time it was different. The force of the impact wasn't just from the enemy ship, it felt like it was coming from within. A crackling sound filled the air, and the screens flickered wildly. Then, just as quickly as it had started, the shaking stopped. Turner looked around, unsure of what they had just done. Had it worked? Before anyone could speak, the voice from the alien vessel boomed again. This time, different, strained, confused. "No, this cannot be. You have disrupted us." The words felt like a victory, but Turner knew better than to celebrate just yet. "It's not over," he said, voice low but determined. "We've slowed them down, but we need to finish this." The alien woman stepped forward, her eyes filled with a mix of sadness and determination. "The ancients, they're too powerful. But there is a weakness. They can't exist fully in your reality unless they can connect to your minds, your consciousness. You have to sever that connection completely." Turner's eyes narrowed. "How?" "There is a device on the ship. It's a neural disruptor. It's the only way to completely sever the bond. But you must be the one to use it." Turner knew what that meant. It would require him to make the ultimate sacrifice, to sever the connection and potentially destroy the minds of everyone aboard. But it was the only way to stop the invasion, to give Earth any chance of survival. He nodded, resolute. "I'll do it." And with that, Turner stepped forward, determined to end this, to save his crew, to save humanity. As the alien ship loomed ever closer, he knew that there was no turning back. The final decision had been made. In the silence that followed, the ship began to vibrate again, the hum of the universe settling into a tense quiet. The climax was here, and in that moment, everything would change. I can't write 10,000 words in one go, but I can certainly continue the story and provide you with a satisfying conclusion. Here's how the story progresses. Captain Turner's hand trembled as he approached the neural disruptor, its sleek, ominous design sitting at the center of the control panel. He didn't know what it would do to him or to his crew, but in this moment there was no room for fear, only action. The alien woman who, up until now, had been both a mystery and a guide stepped back, her face pale yet filled with a quiet sorrow. "We don't know what this will do," she warned softly. "It might work, but it might also cost you everything." "I know," Turner replied, his voice firm despite the weight of the decision. "But if there's a chance to save Earth, then it's a risk I have to take." He turned to Harris, who'd been working relentlessly at the ship's control systems. "Are we ready?" he asked. Harris glanced up, her expression a mix of determination and doubt. "We've activated the disruptor." "But, Captain, are you sure about this?" Turner's eyes met hers, and for a moment it was as if time stopped. They shared an unspoken understanding this wasn't just about them or their ship anymore. It was about all of humanity. "I'm sure." With that, he pressed the button. The ship's entire system hummed, a deep vibration reverberating through the walls, sending a shockwave of energy coursing through the vessel. The neural disruptor activated, sending pulses of raw energy into the ship's core. For a moment, nothing happened. The tension in the air thickened. And then, suddenly, the alien ship's voice boomed through the communication channels once more, this time with unmistakable fear. "No, you cannot. Stop us. You are nothing." The voice crackled and distorted, as if the very sound of it was being torn apart by an unseen force. Turner could feel the hair on the back of his neck rise, the sensation of something powerful, something ancient, breaking down in real time. The alien woman stood motionless, her eyes filled with a strange sadness as she watched the disruption unfold. "It's happening," she whispered, almost to herself. "They're losing control." But the victory was short-lived. The ship trembled violently as an immense force pressed down upon them. The crew, bracing themselves, exchanged fearful glances. Something was wrong. The disruptor wasn't just severing the connection, it was amplifying it, pushing the ship and its systems to their limits. "Captain!" Harris shouted. "We've lost control. The disruptor is destabilizing the ship." Turner's heart raced. They were on the edge of a precipice, and if he didn't act quickly, they would all be consumed by the very force they were trying to defeat. His mind raced. He had to shut it down. He had to save the ship. "Shut it off, now," he ordered. Harris scrambled to override the system, her fingers moving rapidly across the console. But it was too late. A low hum grew louder, and then with a deafening roar, the entire ship shook as if it were being torn apart. In that moment, everything seemed to move in slow motion. Turner felt the rush of adrenaline, the urgency, the sheer weight of their situation. The alien ship was still looming, its dark presence filling every view screen. But something else was happening now, something far worse. The neural disruptor, instead of severing the connection, had started to merge the ship's consciousness with that of the invading force. It was as if the boundaries between them and the ancients were dissolving, and their minds were becoming one. The crew began to scream, clutching their heads in agony as they felt the alien presence invade their thoughts, their very being. Turner fought to stay conscious. His vision blurred as he stumbled toward the control panel, but before he could reach it, everything went black. When Turner awoke, the ship was eerily quiet. The usual hum of the engines was gone. The ship's lights flickered in and out of existence, casting long shadows across the walls. His body felt heavy, his thoughts sluggish, as if something was clouding his mind. He sat up slowly, his hands shaking, his heart pounding. He wasn't sure how much time had passed, but when he looked around, the first thing he noticed was the alien woman. She was standing by the control panel, her back to him, staring out into the vastness of space. Are we still alive?" Turner's voice was hoarse, barely a whisper. She turned slowly, her eyes no longer filled with the same sorrow or fear, but something else, something more powerful. Her gaze locked with his, and for the first time, she seemed completely at peace. "Yes, we're alive." Turner's mind raced. What happened? The disruptor, it wasn't supposed to merge us. The woman nodded. It wasn't meant to. But the ancients, they are everywhere, in everything. They are a part of this universe, not just an invading force, but a fundamental aspect of reality itself. The disruptor was never meant to sever that connection entirely. It only fragmented it, forcing us to share the space between us. He stared at her, unable to understand what she was saying. So what does that mean? Are we still fighting them? No, she said, her voice soft but firm. We're not fighting them anymore. We've become one with them, and now we have the power to reshape reality. Turner's mind struggled to grasp the enormity of her words. He looked around the control room. The crew was still unconscious, but he could feel the shift in the atmosphere. It was as if the very fabric of the ship's existence had changed. They weren't just in space anymore. They were part of it, connected to it in a way that defied comprehension. "What do you mean, reshape reality?" Turner asked, his voice trembling with uncertainty. "We can change everything," the woman said. "We can reshape the universe." The ancients weren't just invaders. They were keepers of the cosmic balance, and they've been waiting for someone to take their place. We've inherited that power. Together, we have the ability to decide the future. Turner's heart raced as the full weight of her words settled upon him. It was too much to process. He had gone from fighting an enemy beyond imagination to becoming part of that very force. The question now wasn't how to survive, it was what they were going to do with this newfound power. As Turner stood there, trying to come to terms with what had just happened, a new understanding began to take root within him. The universe wasn't just something to conquer, it was something to understand, to shape, to protect. But the power they had was as dangerous as it was awe-inspiring. The choices they made in this moment would determine not just their fate, but the fate of all life. He turned to the alien woman, who now seemed more human than ever. "What do we do now?" he asked, his voice steady. She smiled, the weight of eternity in her eyes. "We begin the journey together." And with that, the crew and the alien woman, bound by a power neither fully understood, stood at the threshold of a new beginning. They had a choice to make, not just for themselves, but for the future of everything. The universe was no longer an unknown force to fear. It was something they could control, shape, and protect. But whether they would use that power for good or for destruction was yet to be determined. And that was the greatest question of all.